Hello and welcome to Frontiers of Innovation, a live initiative brought to you by Canon. I'm Etna Trainer and I'm delighted you're here with us. We have so much going on and we have so many people joining us. We're delighted you're here. We're going to talk today about smart cities and inclusive growth for the Middle East. So you've all heard about smart cities. So as I said, just stop and think, how smart is your city and how are you benefiting from it? We have two great speakers that I'm going to introduce you to in just a minute. But just we'd love you to be involved as well. So please make sure you get a few questions in. There's lots we can talk about, and I'll do my best to make sure that we get these questions to our two experts here. And of course, tell us who you are, where you're from. Let us know what's on your mind as well. So lots to talk about in this discussion as we explore the industries and the life and times of a smart city. So let's meet our panel members. We have the Vice President from Khalifa University, Steve Griffiths, is with us. Steve, lovely to have you with us. And also from Saudi Arabia, the head of Center for the Development of Urban Design and Planning at Dassault. So Dai Aldawan is also with us. Two great experts here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Dai, I'd like to talk about smart cities, obviously, with you and get started on this. When we think about smart cities, you actually say it's not maybe enough to just be looking at smart cities. You've actually, when I talked to you earlier, you were saying they need to also be clever. What exactly do you mean?
Well, every time that we bring up the term smart city, we immediately think about the technological part of the equation, and we talk about how technology could help in like develop or bringing some data that would help on planning or putting strategies or others. So we look at it from the perspective of data and of technology interfering in our day-to-day life to think or rethink the design or the planning of cities. However, what we really need to think about or what we really need to look at is the clever city, I call it, or the smarter city, where it's not just about the technological aspect of smart cities, but actually all aspects, like the right infrastructure or the basics of infrastructure for cities, and looking at solutions and innovative ways of approaching our, I'd say, problems that we face in our cities in a more comprehensive aspects. Smart, as I said, we always associate it with technology, but when we say clever, it gives us the chance to actually think about other things or other solutions or other approaches to what makes a city more or smarter or clever.
I like that, yes, smarter, because there's so much that has to go on to make it all come together and to make it all work, and ultimately to make it of benefit to the people who live there. Now, Steve, you have written about this in detail, and I've really enjoyed reading a lot of what you write about. You talk about it a lot, but break it down for us, when you look at the concept of smart cities, and it probably means different things to different people, but give us your interpretation.
Sure, I'll follow on what Di said, and I agree with her points. When I think about a smart city, it's not just about the technologies. The technologies need to enable the citizens' lives to be better. So we're looking at utilizing technological platforms for better lives of the people. And when you think about that, really it's not a smart city we're looking at, it's a sustainable city. So a smart city to me falls under the broader umbrella of sustainable cities. If you think about sustainability, what we're trying to achieve is economic prosperity, social prosperity, and environmental prosperity for the people. So you have a sustainable city and you employ smart technology in order to enable all the different paradigms of sustainability that we're trying to achieve. But we don't stop at sustainability either for myself. When I think about it, we also have to consider resilience. So for a long time, I talked about smart cities and everyone thought, okay, it makes sense, smart cities and sustainable cities. But then the pandemic came with COVID-19 and everyone started to think, what is happening here? How do we become more aligned in our cities to dealing with such a pandemic? And that's when the idea of resiliency came up and became very, I think, important for the way we think about cities. So I think about resiliency, I think, how can we make our cities able to withstand challenges they're faced with? The pandemic was an example of something that happened in healthcare, obviously a very serious healthcare issue, but it's not just health. I mean, you look at the future, climate change is coming. And we know if we don't do something to tackle it, we're going to be faced with a lot of challenges in cities. And so certainly we have to look at climate as a potential area where we have to be resilient. And also cybersecurity. I know later we'll talk about this. I see cyber threats and smart cities as being very important. So to me, sustainable cities that are smart and resilient is where the paradigm is going to continue to go forward in the future.
Indeed, there is so many elements that we have to look at. And indeed, it is about, I suppose, the cooperation, collaboration of everybody, all the departments, all the stakeholders in the city actually talking to each other and working in harmony, because there's so much that has to be done. Now, Di, your background, is as an architect, a management consultant, many great expertise in there. But when we think about urban design, I mean, how has this changed over the years? And when we look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia, are we seeing that sense of community come back to the cities that we're looking at? So maybe work on this from the KSA example.
Sure. KSA cities, just like any other cities that been in the 50s and the 60s, influenced or affected by the automobile. So it just, I would say it was also the beginning of the fast development of those cities. So at that time, that was the idea, or the big idea, is the automobile and their position in cities, and how do we actually work our society and our life around the automobile. But maybe what was a bit affecting Saudi cities is that we didn't really pay attention to the effect or the negative effect of automobiles until really later in our city, I'd say, history, or the modern city history. So we started really understanding the huge effect and what have happened throughout the last, I'd say, 40 to 50 years, or the last really 7 decades, on the way that we designed our cities, is that we start realizing now with our vision 2030 and all the premises and the targets and the approaches that we're trying to achieve, that our cities are not really built around the human scale, I'd say. So we really drove the development of those cities around the automobile, where we end up with not very livable and not that, the quality of life has been affected as well on those in Saudi cities in general. So the Vision 2030 came, and with the biggest understanding of this issue, and trying to resolve and to really rethink the way that we done our cities. So we are doing it into, or we having 2 approaches into that solution or aspect, or the way we are approaching the vision, which is by one, having the giga projects here and there, and experimental planning in cities in a greenfield, I'd say. And then we have the issues that we have in our cities, where we are having initiatives and projects, also considered large projects, to really rethink some of the issues that we face day-to-day life. One of the biggest issues that we're facing, and we are really trying to reconsider by having multiple big projects in the city of Riyadh, for example, is the public space and green space and open spaces for the citizens. So, and considering also the human scale in cities and humanizing cities in general. And we have multiple projects, from King Salman Park to Green Riyadh to Sport Boulevard, and then other smaller approaches, where we are actually looking at the historic cities in Saudi Arabia, and in particular, let's say in Riyadh, we have like a Diriyah neighborhood or city, and we're trying to rethink the development around it, and how do we preserve what's there, and really add the new, where they actually in coherence with each other and not in a clash. And how can we build on that and really use that to promote humanized cities or vibrant cities. There are also other initiatives within the vision. We have one of the targets actually, it's to elevate the urban life in cities, and it's one of the largest targets of the vision. And on that target, we have multiple initiatives under, regardless of the projects that I've talked about, which is individual projects and bits and pieces in cities, but actually initiatives that drive the urban quality, like initiatives on repairing streets and humanizing central cities, preserving old cities, and building on that.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. There's so much. And I think Saudi Arabia at the moment, I mean, it's got to be a dynamic time for city planners and architects and construction developers and everything. There's so much going on. Steve, talk to me a little bit about what you call city science. And again, is this related to artificial intelligence and technology, or does it stand apart?
Well, it can include artificial intelligence. I like the term, so let me try and define it a bit. When you think about science, what we're trying to do is we're trying to gain fundamental understanding of the natural world through empirical knowledge, which we gain from a rigorous scientific methodology. We're trying to understand things around us from first principles sometimes, but using a good methodology so we can get insights that are rigorous. When you apply that to the city, it's really the same paradigm, but now we have a city context. And so when I think about trying to apply city science, I want to understand the city, and I can apply many technologies to understand the city. Today, we have sensors everywhere. I mean, my phone is essentially a sensor. We can create sensors, which can help us interrogate the traffic flow patterns, the weather, whatever you like. So much data is coming to us. We can use these data, understand the city fundamentally. When we understand the city, then we can start to think about interventions which help the people in their everyday lives. This is what I was talking about before, using technology to make a better world for the people. Apply this methodology to take your fundamental knowledge and then start to find new solutions that can be good for those that you're trying to help. When you do that, coming back to the notion of science and experimentation, I think it's important to start looking at how you can pilot technologies, pilot approaches, get people involved, and apply your scientific method to seeing if what you think could help make the world a better place in the city actually works. Don't roll it out all in one shot. See if it works. See if you get good feedback. And if it looks like it's a very positive technology or practice you're trying to deploy, then it can go broader. So in my view, science is science. If you apply it to the natural sciences, the social sciences, or the city sciences, it all should follow the same paradigm. And it excites me. As at Khalifa University, we have many research centers, and this is what we're trying to do with them. We're trying to find ways in which we can understand first where we think interventions will help, and then take small steps to seeing if those interventions make a difference.
And that's very much a common sense approach, I think, as well. Dive, when we look at population growth in cities at the moment, and the fact that so many people live in cities and so many people are actually migrating to cities every year, it's estimated I think that 2/3 of the world's population is going to actually live in cities by 2050, probably even more. Do you think the world, and even particularly this region, I mean, given even what Steve's just been saying there, are we ready to handle this? Do you think we've got the plans in place? Do you think we're ready to make sure that we can accommodate this?
I think we're starting to really understand the risk and understand the problem that we will be facing very close in the future, and we're starting to really, as I said, rethink the way we plan and we design our cities. And I think a lot of cities around the region have realized the effect of immigration and the effect of the growing population in the area. Considering the Middle East is one of the parts of the world where the population is growing in a very fast manner compared to other areas of the world. So I think the conversation has started, and I think there are a lot of strategies and plans and regional plans and city plans and that are trying to really put that in mind as a response to the way they plan for the next 20, 30, or even 40 years. So I think there is a lot of a lot of like attention paid to the to the issue of growing population in cities. And there is an understanding that this is happening and it's faster than we thought it would. So yeah, I think there's from my perspective, from Saudi Arabia and from some of areas of the region that I've been involved around in consultant, that's what I feel is happening. I think there is a clear understanding of that.
Steve, maybe stay with this topic because I think, you've probably got something to say on this too, in terms of it seems like that cities have almost stayed the same, for quite a while. And it's almost in the last few years that really there's been this realization that we really need to, as you say, to employ technology for everybody's benefit. But, are all hands on deck, so to speak? Are we ready to do this? And do you think that the planners are maybe embracing new ideas in terms of what they need to do?
So if you look at the term smart city, if you ask me, smart city peaked in about 2015 timeframe as far as let's go after technologies. Today, what we're seeing is what we talked about earlier. We're seeing a lot of city planners, a lot of those that are looking after cities, think about how to pursue sustainability and resilience. And I think the catalyst is naturally that we've seen things like a pandemic hit us, and we know that we need to be ready for those types of issues. We know that technology can help us. We see climate change coming. Everywhere now, people are talking about how can we be resilient against the potential impacts of climate change, wherever you may be in the world, whatever your geography may be. And cybersecurity, a smart city, is naturally a place where you have many, many opportunities for cyber attack to happen. It can be cyber terrorism, cyber warfare, cyber crime. All these issues that are so salient to us, where are they going to take place? If they're going to take place in a big way, it's in a city. So I think there are a lot of catalysts out there to really get planners moving around the notion of building sustainable, resilient cities that are smart. Now, it's naturally to me, when you look at the population growth, I mean, Dive mentioned this earlier, and we've talked about it many times in many different events, the world's moving toward an urban context. I mean, we're trying to free up land, get away from utilizing this beautiful natural land that's being taken up by populations and people trying to settle there, and we're trying to move people to cities. So I think naturally seeing that there's these different issues we need to address that are coming toward us, seeing that we're trying to free up land so that we can have nature back again and have people in places where they can aggregate, have meaningful, productive lives, do good work, have access to culture. Those are the things a city can be. So we have catalysts to think about how to make a city smart and resilient. And we have the opportunities now with population growth and seeing that we need to have people able to take advantage of what a city can offer. So I do think there is a resurgence and a revitalization of this notion that the city can be something more than it is today.
Di, talk to me about the role of the government in terms of making sure that the city can be more for its people than it is today. Where do you see that?
Well, I mean, as I said before, like smart city as a concept is overloaded of expectations. We put so much expectations of what could smart do, but really the role of the government evolve around creating policies, laws, regulations, programs, and projects that would actually promote sustainability, equity, social coherence, and other concepts that we look for, and also resilient cities, as Adam has mentioned earlier. So I think government could do that, not necessarily through smart city concept. Smart city or smartness or I'd say the technological advancement that we use in smart city is just a tool. I would like to say that smart city concept is great, but let's not give it more than what it's offering. Really, it's a tool to achieve some of our targets and some of our wishes, I would say, to the future cities.
Steve, indeed, it is a tool in many ways, but also when we look at the technology and we look at the role of the government and other stakeholders, we're also looking at the role of a few tech giants who we have to subscribe to, and they're very much. There's a few people controlling this, if maybe that's not the right word, but how do we manage that, and how do we actually make sure that we're going down the right direction?
Well, yeah, the tech giants, they're going to be very visible to us for a long time. And it's simply a matter that when you're looking at a smart city and you're looking at utilizing ICT technologies, having the ability to store and analyze massive, massive amounts of data is a very challenging task. And you need to have the technologies to do that. You need to have the trained people to do that. And the Microsofts, the Amazons of the world, I mean, they're just very good at this. So it does make sense to partner with these organizations and try to bring them into a framework which allows them to do good things for the city. Now, that said, I think the role of the government in choosing these partners and working with these partners is to make sure the partners do what we need them to do, investing properly in their deployment of their technology and trying to make their technologies as broadly available as possible, and making sure their technologies work the way we need them to work. So when I think about the government policy perspective, policies to me can be around innovation, they can be around regulation, they can be around fiscal and financial incentives. If you look at the regulation side, when we bring these companies into the framework of a smart city, we need to make sure they're looking after the privacy of data. I mean, too often we hear about all the issues that are arising when the data from some technology is shared with the company then allows that data to be accessed by others, and who knows where your personal data is going to get out to then. So I think we have to bring in frameworks which allow the data to be protected of people. Otherwise, people aren't going to protect it, aren't going to believe in the technologies and participate in the smart city. We also have to make sure that when we bring these companies' technologies into the city, we leverage the opportunities that we can bring upon them when we bring their technologies in the sense that if you want to say, for instance, have a procurement of their technology and you put out a tender, in that tender, you can put in, say, some stipulations that when the company brings this technology, they need to also support the broad deployment to all parts of the city. Because we know that not everyone has access to high-speed internet, all the computational tools they need to access what we call the smart technology frameworks. So I think that's another way in which we can bring public-private partnership to the good of the city. And we can start to bring upon the companies that we're working with some kind of regulation, but also it's a financial incentive to them to bring to the good of the citizens their technologies in a meaningful way.
Yes, I mean, it is. It's so important. And I think that trade-off in that sense, whereby it's helping both parties, is absolutely essential. I mean, people want to be safe in their cities. I think this is absolutely essential. They want to be physically safe, but also when it comes to, cybersecurity, they also want to, feel that they're safe in terms of giving away their data. Okay, we give away a lot of our data for free and very voluntarily every day of the week. But talk to me a little bit, the fact that now this data is out there, it's available for the government, it's, on various platforms, and they don't have to really go looking for it. It's all there. It's almost gifted to them because it is in the public domain. Are there issues around there in terms of people feeling safe and in one way feeling perhaps that their privacy, is respected?
I think this is a very, you can argue both sides, but I would say that if it's shared willingly and if it's open information that you leave in the internet, why not use it to, probably advance a certain project or a certain plan or a certain, because yes, we said that smart city is not everything, but data, as I said before, or smart city concept in general is a tool, is a strong tool that could actually help tremendously in planning and decision making and strategies around cities and regions. So if it's, I think if it's shared, willingly shared, why not use it? I mean, if it's for the good of the people and the good of the city and what could really bring advantage to everyone, why not? So yeah, I think it's, yeah. I think it depends on how is these information been accessed. Is it a private information or is it a public information?
Steve, let's continue this conversation. And again, I suppose in many ways on the sort of advantages of available data and maybe a few of the disadvantages. I mean, I think, we see in a city even like Dubai and many cities around the world, there's, and even the police here have been very open and eager to demonstrate, you know, if anything goes wrong, that they can demonstrate to us that, you know, they know where people have been and what has happened, and they solve crimes very quickly sometimes, and are very proud to show us how it's been done. So, you know, we know there's data being collected at many touch points around the city, but also there's a lot there in terms of helping to protect the population, and all of this data is feeding into, you know, a bigger picture. Talk to me a little bit about what you see, the advantages and perhaps a few disadvantages there.
Well, I think you brought up some good advantages. And so if you look at the areas in which a city can benefit from the data being available, civil security makes sense. So we want to be sure that we're safe, and that you can do facial recognition to see if there are suspects of crime in the city. You can potentially do predictive policing so that you know where to deploy your police force proactively so that you don't have crimes. There's work being done on that. You can have priority dispatch on your emergency services. So in an emergency situation, where do you deploy the people to get to those parts of the city that have the most need, and maybe have the people that are most at risk? Those kind of uses of the data can be quite good. Now, that said, these data are not always used in the way that's going to be most helpful in the situation I described, in the sense that when you have an AI approach, say a machine learning approach, it utilizes these data, and it utilizes historical data that are going to come from the sources in which you collected it. So today, if you're trying to recognize a suspect in an airport, in a city, or wherever it may be, and you are not having data that's been trained on whatever the nationality of that particular suspect is, you may misidentify the person. And so if I'm of a particular nationality or ethnicity where I'm underrepresented in the data that's been collected, then I'm at risk of having potentially false accusation, false arrest, a lot of things that could be very disruptive in my life. Likewise, if I'm having a system interact with me in the smart city, say to monitor or check some aspect of my interaction with the government civil service, if they're trying to understand through an automated system what I'm conveying to them, and the dialect I have is not one that the system's been trained on, again, there could be challenges in trying to have a way in which you can interact seamlessly with the system. So I think within these different open data platforms, there is an opportunity to not have sufficient transparency in how the algorithms that are processing the data are operating. There's potential to have biases in the data that's actually collected. It's not intentional. It's just because we don't collect the data from all the different groups in which we have represented for the applications we're developing. So I think there's good things happening around use of data, but there's also potential issues in which the data are utilized in ways that maybe are unanticipated, and then end up causing problems for those groups that we're supposed to be trying to help.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, you know, a lot of this is people are learning how to analyze it, learning how to work with it. And, you know, we hear about new developments every day. I think only this week there's, you know, eye scanning developments now at the airport here in Dubai that has, we've known they've been there for a while, and then we've seen the great technology. So it's going to really move people through the airport at a faster rate. And, you know, they will be able to make sure that it's efficient, and it helps people as well. One area, though, I think in terms of COVID and die, if you look at this, and I think we saw it here in the UAE, that's what I know of, but it worked incredibly efficiently well, is very much in the health sector, and particularly the management of the vaccines and all of that, whereby all of the health players really came together. So in many ways, how does this change healthcare in a city? Because the technology is actually there to help people. And I think it also cuts down on travel time and people going to the doctor, and that because we've had to do something different.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought up health. Is it okay if I take that as a response? Because it's one that's
Okay, please, Steve. Stay with this one, and Di can come in on it as well. Steve.
Yeah, no, it was top of mind because as I was thinking about the last question, the health became something on my mind. As I mentioned, civil security. We know there's many applications in civil security, but when you look at the smart city and all the sectors in which it can serve, I think two of the areas that are most underserved by smart technologies historically have been health and education. In health, what we've seen recently is that there was really not enough focus on having the health data of the populations available for rapid analysis. So what we're going to see now, I'm certain we're going to see in the coming years, there'll be much more focus on bringing the health records to a digital format And then we can start utilizing the information about the populations to have more rapid responses, particularly to issues that arise like COVID-19, around epidemiological studies, so we can trace disease, figure out where it may be going, and try to be proactive in preventing further outbreaks. The other area that I see as an opportunity is using digital biomarkers. And so we've been doing a lot of this throughout the pandemic. And when digital biomarkers, imagine with your smartphone, you have an app and you're worried whether or not you may be coming down with COVID-19, or you have it and you want to see if it's progressing in a certain way. If you're able to train a system to recognize your speech patterns, your cough patterns, heart rate variability, maybe also combine with a few answers to short questions, and that can help the system learn whether or not maybe you've contracted COVID, maybe you have COVID, it's getting worse and you need to be monitored more closely. These kind of systems, and we built one called COVID Sense at the university, and we deployed it now. It's available on the Apple Store and Google Play. We've deployed it, and hospitals are using it, doctors are using it to do exactly this: see where their patients may be, or their possible patients may be with COVID-19. So I think the entire digital suite of technologies available to us now, the sensors which we have, which are growing all the time, but we already have smartphones. So yeah, there's already a platform available to get so much information about us, and we can be intelligent with that. And it's only going to grow in the future. You know, the Oura Ring, which you can wear a ring now, which is going to detect any abnormalities in the way that your sleep pattern is or your body temperature. So all these biometric analyses, all these biosignals that we give off to different devices that we wear, I think that's going to be a great opportunity as well in the future around health. So I'm excited in particular about the healthcare sector in smart cities. I think it's a great opportunity.
Indeed. I mean, you just think of these things. It sounds a bit, futuristic in one point, but then again, we can see that, your watch can actually monitor your blood pressure and your heartbeat and various things like this. So there's so much of it happening already, but great to hear. And I'll talk about education in a few minutes, but there's so much going on there. Di, again, on the health sector in Saudi Arabia, do you see, sort of a unification of the data and how it can help the population really? And particularly, I think what we've learned in the last year.
Honestly, what was for me, very impressive is the response itself to the pandemic. We all understand this is not going to be the last pandemic. The problem that we will be facing in the future will be pandemics more than wars, as we understand at this point. So the response that I have seen in Saudi Arabia, and like at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was confused. Even the health sector is not sure of how to deal with the whole situation, and it's fine. But the solutions that they come up with and the way they have dealt with or their response to COVID or to the pandemic was very impressive and very interesting. I never thought that we will be at this point of sophistication in terms of the response to such pandemic. But I mean, these things will also inform the health care, as Steve had mentioned, even further and beyond the pandemic later on. There are a lot of things like like checking on your diagnosis through your smartphone, through your, as you said, your Apple Watch or your watch in general, or through a call. Before, as you said, we have to drive to check on things that not necessarily, that dangerous or not that they don't need the immediate attention. There will be chairs or even beds, and also doctors and nurses that are, not really performing to the highest potential because they have to attend to certain patients that do not necessarily need that attention. And there are other really critical part of the population who actually need that fast response. So I thought the way they dealt with it was very, very incredibly impressive and very important to really see how there is this strong response that is very well thought of, even with the vaccine and the centers that provide the vaccine, the way they have done the organization around it. So they are not really actually causing it by having, a large number of people in one place, or the way they really organize it was very, very interesting. Also developing those apps that would track, someone who have probably encountered a meeting, or somebody who has the virus, and how do they actually dealt with that, and how do you get informed, even if it's like a distant person that have seen someone, that have met someone who had the virus, and how do you get notified where you can actually be safe yourself and your family. So it's nice. It's nice to see the strong response. It's nice to know that this will also advance into other things in the healthcare. And as Steve have mentioned, there hasn't been that much of an evolution in terms of smartness or technology around or data in general around healthcare. And it's good to know that now it's just a start, I would say, and it's already impressive.
It is indeed. And now that less of us will maybe need to travel to the doctor, whereby telemedicine can actually move pretty faster, and we've gotten used to that. But I want to talk about transportation, Steve. This is huge when it comes to, I think, kind of technology and the smartness of the city. And I suppose even I was talking to someone the other day, and I just thought, the traffic light system, how smart has that always been in terms of keeping us safe? So from the very basics, it's been there for a while. But talk to me about how it can actually develop, and how it can change, and what it will mean.
I think a smart city, one of the areas that's most looked at today is mobility. And so if you look at the sectors of a city in which there's a lot of focus going on right now technologically, energy, water, waste, mobilities are happening. And mobility to me is very interesting, because mobility, you're moving people, you're moving things, or you're building infrastructure to do one of those two things. And so if we talk about moving people in the mobility space, you have all types of ways in which you can do this. You have ride hailing, you have car sharing, you have the emergence of micromobility. And there I would talk about things like scooters, electric scooters, or personal people-powered scooters, ways to walk, and we can bike, we can take public transportation, or we can put it all together as with mobility as a service and try and find the best way to get from point A to point B using any of the above. With COVID-19, what happened, of all those things I talked about, the public transportation got hit the hardest. Because when the COVID-19 came out, what people were always worried about was time to get to where you were going to be. You want to be as efficient as possible in getting from your current location to where you want to be. When COVID-19 came, everyone became much more worried about just getting there safely without getting infected, because at first we didn't know what COVID was. And now we know it, after we have much more information, it's a severe disease. So you want to avoid that. And so with safety in mind, obviously going in public transportation becomes something which is not as widely accepted as what you want to do today. So I think what's going to happen going forward in cities around moving people is the whole trend toward the soft mobility, micromobility. That's good, because that creates sustainability. So more walking, more biking when possible. Scooters, when they're done safely, which is not always the case, is a kind of a good thing. But I think more than that, we want to be able to bring people back to public transportation. One, because in some cities, people rely on it. It's their life, it's their livelihoods. Not everyone can afford a car. So you need to have an ability to make the public transportation economically viable, and you can't do that if no one's using it, except a few people that have to. So we need to make it something that's going to be there, it's going to be economically viable and desirable. I think the way that will happen is the notion where there are more technologies which allow you to seamlessly see public transportation in your route from A to B, along with ride sharing, micromobility, microtransit. Maybe there's a place where you can walk easily to get from one of these different modes of transportation to another. I think that coming together is going to be one of the major shifts we're seeing around intelligent transportation in cities, around moving people. Now, that said, not every city will have that. I think the lowest hanging fruit is exactly what you said, and I see it happening all the time. In the infrastructure itself, just making the city more efficient through intelligent transportation systems. Sensors are everywhere, and so when you can detect cars, you can detect people, you can detect bicycles, you can find ways to optimize the means by which you control your traffic lights. It can be the light itself, it can be signage to give people advance warning of when lights is going to change. Those things are happening broadly, and I think that will continue to happen. But the real paradigm shift, I think, will be when people are seamlessly using all the modes of transportation to get from where they are to where they want to be.
Now, Di, in Saudi Arabia, and you mentioned it earlier, the love affair with the automobile, and I think it's it's certainly something that we have in cities around the world, but also I think the expanse of some of the cities, you need a car in Saudi Arabia, and there hasn't been public transport, but there wasn't great public transport here, even in Dubai, where I'm at 15 years ago. But look at it today. I mean, it's got a metro, it's got trams, it's got buses, it's moving at a very different rate. How is, can cities in Saudi Arabia sort of reconcile? How do they maybe depend less on a car and maybe move towards public, or indeed, is that the answer?
I think it is the answer, actually. I mean, with the pandemic, definitely, especially public transportation has a bit of a step back on the approach, and how do we really want to rethink public transit in light of a pandemic or other. But I think it's at the end, we have to all agree that public transportation is not just sustainable. And let me just rephrase it and not say public transportation, but let me say a sustainable mobility, which offers everything. It's not just the transit itself or the motor itself, but also all modes of moving, I'd say. Is very necessary, and this is the way that cities will operate and will go if we want to really improve the quality of life in cities and the economic and city prosperities. The public transportation, I mean, in Saudi, there are multiple challenges, I would say. There are basic infrastructure, let's say sidewalks or other things that has to be worked out in order for a transportation system or a mobility system to work together. Because as Steve also has mentioned, is that when you look into what public transportation or a meaningful or sustainable public transportation that is really useful is when you have a multi ways of moving around. You cannot have let's say metros and buses if you don't have a public ground that will also support the people who are walking to go or to get from point A to B safely as well. If it's not comfortable in terms of climate as well. So this has to also be reconsidered. If it's not well planned, where these positioning of where these hubs happen, where you can translate or you can change from a metro to a bus or to a bike or to, let's say, what is happening in the state where people come from suburbs where they park the cars close by a metro station on the edge of the city, and then they can actually move around for the whole day within or using the public transit and to go back. So there will be the mix of all of that. I think in order for it to work, we have to first make sure or pay attention to our infrastructure, basic infrastructure, I'd say. Make sure that we are covering every aspect of mobility, from walkability, bike lanes, buses, and faster ways of moving. Also to not we're not saying kill the car in total, but we're saying reduce the amount of car ridership and make it where it's only used when it's necessary. It's only used when you have to. It's only used. So you are more driven into using other modes of mobility. And in order for that to work, it has to be comfortable and convenient for people. Otherwise, nothing really will change.
I want to talk more to you about this as well. We'll stay with this for just a few minutes. But Steve, let me bring you in here. It's when we think of all of these things that have to happen, it's also a bit of a cultural shift as well. And of course, when we look at this region too, and any region, you look beyond, you look at Asia, you look at that, you look at big cities in India where the smog level has been so bad. I mean, so putting it in terms of the environment and the use of the car, and now the shift to electric cars, but again, the price point is not there available for everybody. what can we do on that? Because we see some countries adopting the whole concept of electric cars and saying, and even today, I think there was a big meeting with the House of Lords talking about this is the only way forward. What can be done with that, particularly in this region?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, electrification is where a lot of the world is headed, and there's a lot of policies being put out there that say by 2030, 2035, there won't be internal combustion engine vehicles entering cities. That's possible, but just imagine if everybody's still driving a personal vehicle and it's electric, you may have less noise, you may have less emissions, but it's still gonna be a lot of traffic. So when we're looking at sustainability, we want to look at the holistic picture. So I do think, as Di was saying, and as I was alluding to earlier, we need to find ways to make these other modes of travel attractive. And I love electrification for buses. I mean, I think if we can get people to embrace the bus, they should all be electric. And China has been doing this in massive quantities, right? Buses everywhere in China are electrified. I think that's something that we should be doing broadly. In the city itself, I like electric vehicles a lot, and I like them when they're used in public transportation, for instance, taxis, right? So if we can make all the taxis electric in some way, it doesn't, to me, battery is okay. If the people want to do hydrogen, that's a big exciting topic now. It's still electric, a little bit different way in which it operates, but it still achieves the same purpose. The taxis, the ride hailing vehicles, all those different vehicles which are going to be part of this system which operates together to get people from where they are to where they want to go. If those can be brought into a cleaner paradigm, and we can reduce the amount of cars that people are coming into in the city by themselves, I think we'll do well. And we can deal with and handle all these issues that people talk about. Will there be too much peak demand for electricity? It's very possible. I mean, the other area that I deal with a lot is on the supply side. And everyone's worried about putting too much solar on the grid. It's the same idea. You don't want to put too many cars on the grid that are electric at one time when you're not able to predict when they're going to be on the grid asking for electricity. So I think we can try to be proactive in moving toward clean transportation. But as Di said, and I've been saying, it's got to be part of a planned system. It's got to push forward the notion that multimodal mobility with the incorporation of public transportation is the way we want to go.
Now, of course, Di, in Saudi Arabia, I think gasoline is probably among the cheapest to fill your car, probably in the world. I forget what it was when I was there. And again, you've got a whole system that has changed. You've got more people working now. You've got women driving. You've got a whole new stress on the system. But also, I mean, when we look at electric cars, I think people look at it and think, yes, it's a great idea. But even as Steve is saying there, it's more stress on the grid. Is the infrastructure built to manage it? I mean, what do you see as the solution? And is it the electric car?
I honestly don't think that electric cars is a solution to what we're facing. Electric car would take exactly the same amount of space in our cities as a motor car. I mean, yes, it could be more clean, but also we're not sure. Like if it's a solar system, even like to build those solar systems, it's also not that clean still. So in terms of clean and sustainable, we might give it a bit, but it's not as much as people think how electric cars are clean. And as I said, like taking the same space as motor cars, I think there is no difference in transformation, in the transformation of cities. We still have to cross a street where there is cars driving and people's safety is more important. We're still having cities in the region, Dubai, for instance, and even in Riyadh, where you have I'd say a roadway of streets within the city that are in the size of neighborhoods combined in Europe or in the US, some of the cities in the US. So I don't see electric car as a solution, honestly. I see it as, yeah, a bit better, but that's it. I don't put so much on electric cars. I think probably we should really look at the multiple ways of transportation or the solution really lays. And that's what we really need. And that's what would change the way we plan and design our cities in the future to better, or to get a better life or a better lifestyle to our citizens. And also we have touched on this, I remember earlier last week when we talked about also the how transportation, public transportation would actually not just help the city to become also sustainable, but also like equity. It helps with that. Just a few years ago, not many women weren't able to drive in Saudi Arabia, and now they are driving, but still the number is short. There is not enough examination centers to get driver license. The women are not all comfortable with driving, giving all the years they haven't been driving. So having a transportation system will actually also encourage part of the population or society, like women, low-income families and others, to really have access to opportunities in cities, where we will see then really the social inclusion and the opportunities for all. So that would also support the equity beside the sustainability, absolutely.
Indeed. So, and Steve, no matter how these people get to work, no matter how they travel, when they get there, and when the summers hit here, it's going to be very hot. So the stress on the grid in terms of air conditioning, the whole sustainability of the environment, more people moving to the cities, more waste. I mean, again, that has to be managed in a very holistic way to make sure that it is actually managed, I guess.
Yeah, in that sense, what we've done, and I think this is where we have to go with Smart Cities. At Khalifa University, we worked with Saudi Arabia when KA Care was initially planning out its renewables program. We looked at these issues. How do you figure a way to bring clean energy to a city? And so what I preferred was always looking at the demand side. So you look at the transportation system, you look at the buildings, you look at the way in which there will be demand for electricity, there will be demand for mobility. And if that's a case where you can apply artificial intelligence to do proper prediction of when you're going to have demand and figure out how to, say, turn down the demand when possible. And there's many sophisticated, actually fairly creative ways you can do it. Simply in a building, if you're looking at cooling, just make sure the thermal inertia is utilized as much as possible so that when you're going to be short on supply of clean electricity, you just let the building turn itself down a little bit as far as the amount of electricity it's putting in to do the cooling, and let that thermal mass just carry it forward for a little bit, and then you go back to supplying energy when you need to. So we built a system that looked at the resource forecasting from solar energy, looked at all the dispatchable assets on the grid, could be batteries, could be other power plants, whatever the electricity companies that think about, and tried to couple that up with the understanding of demand, utilizing, of course, machine learning, artificial intelligence technique, so that there could be this nice way of doing a predictive dispatch of your energy to the city or to the environment where you're looking to try to make sure you're doing that balancing. So I think ultimately what we don't want to lose when we're talking about sustainability, we don't want to lose focus that the ultimate way to be sustainable is just reduce your demand to the extent you possibly can without making people uncomfortable or having to forego certain activities. So I'd say that's really, to me, the opportunity is to try to push the smart city to be an efficient city in mobility and everything that we do. And if there were a climate where you can all walk, great. I mean, that would work out just fine, but it's not going to happen everywhere. So then you bring in these different ways of going from point A to point B that are appropriate for the context. So to me, that seems like the way we need to be thinking about the city when it comes to this issue of can we balance it? Well, let's balance it, but let's balance as little as we have to, because that's the ultimate way to be sustainable.
Yeah, and indeed, I mean, we're lucky, I guess, in many ways. The weather has been just absolutely beautiful for so many months of the year. So it's really only we're coming into kind of May, June, July, August. So I mean, I suppose, yeah, that's still a long 4 months. But Di, and it's great to hear so much work is going on at the university in this. I mean, this is absolutely essential. But with all of the new work that's going on, Di, you look at people like yourself, architects, looking at people in planning and all of that. Is there enough, when we look at the talent that's available, the pool of talent in this region, do we have enough people pursuing careers in the university to meet that demand and to be able to manage it?
No.
Okay.
We are very far. We are very far away from having enough people or enough planners and urban designers and urbanists in general, I'd say. This is a very, very important actually topic to be discussed in the region as a whole, not just in Saudi. And there is need to be a very serious move or initiatives or bundle of initiatives to help grow that number. We really don't have enough experts from the region. We don't have enough people who are really dedicating their career around planning. And even when we do, we mostly have academics who are not very involving themselves in the practice itself of what is happening. Also, we have a lot of universities where graduates really weren't part of the what is going on in the ground and what are the expected changes that we want to see in our cities moving further or forward. One of the studies that McKinsey have done, I think in 2015 or 16 in Saudi is around the subject, and it just the result was very concerning in ways that they were suggesting that even when we start building those capabilities now, we will not have enough capabilities to carry on in urban design and planning or urbanism until 20 years from the year.
Wow. So that's one area that needs a lot of attention. We have to wrap up because we've only got a minute or two left. But give me another area, Di, just before we go, in terms of what do you think needs to be done now to really make sure that we can have smarter and more clever cities?
Again, it's looking at the whole or the comprehensive approach in designing and planning cities, and let's not put so much expectations into one thing and not look at the others. Sustainability, cohesion, which is equity, and also city resilience is key. And let's definitely start looking at cities in a clever way, where innovation is really a process and a way of doing things to get either where we want to go, or really to really look at our future and how do we want to approach it as well. And let's not put all our eggs in one basket and really look at every aspect of sustainability, resilience, and equity.
Absolutely. It's all of that has to be done together. Steve, I'm leaving you the closing word here. What do we need to be doing now and really focusing on to make sure that we can get to a brighter and better future?
Well, we start with the notion of sustainable cities that are resilient, and then we apply smart technologies to achieve those purposes. When we're doing that, I think we want to make sure that whatever smart technologies we're bringing to solutions are going to be recognizing all the population of the city. So we don't want to leave people out, because we talked about earlier, when you collect these data for smart technology, sometimes you're not going to have all the data of all the population that you're trying to get technology to serve. Finally, in order to make sure you have the people that are going to run these technologies, develop them, that are aware of these issues, I think you really have to make sure the educational system has good urban planners, good systems thinkers, and good people in digital. If you don't have people that understand those three areas, they don't have to understand all of them in one individual person, but have a collective number of people that can work together in teams to work on smart cities, sustainable cities, resilient cities that have those skills, it's going to be very challenging. So I'd put my focus in that framework.
Indeed, and thank you both so much. There's so much that we managed to discuss, but indeed we could have carried on for another hour on this. I mean, it's fascinating to have both of your input into it. So I really want to thank you. Di, thank you so much from coming from, with all of your background, and indeed from the urban design and planning area in Saudi Arabia too. Thank you so much. And to Steve from Khalifa University, thank you both. And of course, to all of you, I hope this has been very informative. I hope you found it engaging. And without a doubt, I found it very interesting and educational indeed. But still a lot to be done. And it really is about everybody coming together, all of the stakeholders coming together. That's it from us for this edition, Frontiers of Innovation. We will continue the series right throughout every month, where we're really bringing you experts around the world, dynamic speakers talking about innovation and new ways of living for everybody on all of these topics that deal with each and every one of us, that impact our lives every month. So we will continue to do that, and That's about it from here. So from all of us at Canon Frontiers of Innovation, that's about it for today. Thank you so much for being with us. And of course, all of these series, the entire series, will be available on the website. So make sure you look at Canon Middle East if you want to see this in more detail and look back on any of our other series. Once again, it's been great to be with you. Stay safe, stay engaged, and stay with Frontiers of Innovation. Thanks so much.